Just getting the recording started. Right. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this APMG webinar. Today we're talking about amplifying Agile with Neuroscience, and we've got two brilliant presenters to take you through the content. First of all, Melanie Franklin, who's a Agile and change management guru, and in more recent times has really delved into the world of neuroscience due to the way the brain has an obvious impact on the way we work in an Agile fashion and how we manage and plan change. And we also have Tibisay Vera, who should be with us any moment now. Tibi is a neuroscientist by trade. So between Melanie and Tibi, you've got some great content to take you through the next hour or so. Just before we get started, I'll cover a little bit of housekeeping. So the first point to note is we are recording the session, and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email as soon as we can, as soon as we've got the recording online. So that will be available for future viewing. Secondly, you're welcome to submit questions at any stage. So you should see that from your Zoom control panel, where you can submit questions, and even in the chat, if there's any comments you want to make as we go. We will make time towards the end, at least 10 minutes, hopefully, to address some of those questions. And last but not least, your feedback is really important to us, so it helps us plan and deliver webinars in the future. So any feedback is gratefully received, and you'll have my email address from the reminder emails and also the follow-up email that will be coming soon. So I think that's it for me. So Melanie, over to you to get started.
Thanks very much. First of all, just so that we can get a conversation going, anybody want to put in the chat whether they are currently working in an Agile way? That's number one. Do you know anything about neuroscience? I've got Scott having a look at the chat, and I'm sure he'll call out any interesting comments you want to make, but it's a chance for you to share with others and let people know what you're up to. So just let us know. Do you know much about neuroscience? Do you know much about Agile? Are you working in that way? I can see Cara's raised her hand. I don't know if you're allowing comments at this point, Mark, but or Cara might want to put her view in the chat. I'm getting the chat is disabled in the Q&A area, but oh, chat is disabled. That's what everybody's saying. So maybe we want to enable the chat. If I ask people to put stuff in the chat, you can put it in the Q&A if you want to, guys. Just let us know how you're thinking. Meanwhile, while you're sorting out those technical issues, I'll get started. I'm here with my colleague Tibi. She and I trained the Neuroscience for Change certification course from APMG. We launched it last year. It went through quite a few pilots. It's now a 2-day course. It's fantastic. The feedback we get is about the insights that people have, and that moment where they have that discovery, wow, this really works. Effectively, what I'm going to do in this webinar is do exactly that. I'm going to show you some of the insights that I have had particularly when I'm using the model that Tibi takes us through on the Neuroscience for Change course, the Pepe model. So let me get started. I know it's being recorded already, and we've had a bit of a chat about how to do that. As far as the objectives are concerned, I published the Agile Change Management Handbook 10 years ago. I published the 2nd edition a few years ago. It's one of those big sellers because it's not just about Agile IT development. It's about how we use an Agile approach for running any kind of project, program, change initiative, even our portfolio work. What I want to have a think about today is it's really just applying what we know from neuroscience, understand how our brains like to work, demonstrate how the Agile techniques, some of the core Agile techniques really are very brain smart. And if you know the neuroscience, you go, oh, well, that's why it works. So a lot of what you're going to get from this webinar today is sort of evidence of, yeah, what I'm doing in my more iterative approach is a really good idea. And actually, the neuroscience is showing that to me. So Agile techniques are brain smart is really what we're going to get from today. As far as an agenda is concerned, for a very short webinar like this, all I wanted to do was put up here that what I want to emphasize are 2 things. Throughout any initiative, project, program, or change, how do we minimize the threats that we all feel when we're confronted with, you're going to have to work differently, you're going to have to do things you haven't done before. So how do we decrease the negative brain chemistry? And Tibby's a real expert on that. So, and it's probably the most fun thing in the course. I mean, the first half day is spent talking a lot about threat and reward responses and the different chemical reactions in the brain. Because when you know to minimize threats and create rewards, wow, that really becomes the bellwether against which you can do an awful lot of work. And I'll demonstrate how I'm using some of those thoughts. But we're going to have a look at small cycles of change. The core agile approach is that we chunk things up, whether we call them iterations or increments. So we're going to have a look at how working in those smaller cycles is really brain smart and why it's brain smart. And off the back of that, we're going to have a look at other agile techniques like prioritizing, team working, the psychological safety that we talk about so much that underpins team working in an agile approach, and also the impact of celebrations, possibly because it's my favorite and because it has such a positive impact, and it's so simple to do. So let's have a look at our starting point. Effectively, the brain will always have one or other of these reactions or something somewhere along the spectrum. So what we want to think about when we're looking at any kind of change is that initially we will experience pain, the anxiety, the stress. This is different. I don't know how this is going to work. Do I have the skills for this? Do I have the experience? Will it be successful? And of course, all of those feelings completely reduce the energy we have for making change happen, because we're so caught up in the difficulties, the fear, the loss. I came home last night and found my builder had completely changed the layout of the upper floor of my house, and moved the kitchen into the sitting room and vice versa. I think the level of anxiety and stress that I felt, because it was unexpected. It was yet another change on top of multiple changes that are taking place in my house at the moment, on top of multiple changes that are taking place in business. I had no energy to say whether or not that was a good change or not. I had no energy to engage in the conversations, even though I then had to go out to a kitchen showroom with a couple of people and give my views. So what was happening at that point was that, you know, it was that feeling of just focusing in on, oh, this is another disaster, this is another problem. On that noradrenaline we talk about, the hypervigilance, is you almost, when you're stressed through change, the wider context disappears and actually you start to focus in on what you're struggling with. And therefore the support you get from putting it into a wider context disappears. What I mean by that is that when we're struggling with something and we go, will this matter in a week? Will this matter in a month? Will we still care about this next year? All of that goes, and we just focus in on what we're struggling with at the moment. Whereas if we can emphasize the positives, the advantages, the opportunities and the benefits, if we can create a journey through a project or a change initiative that is pleasurable, then if we can create that sense that it's okay to proceed, then we get the energy to keep going. And it builds a natural resilience that even when things go wrong, we will just keep going. We know probably from a lot of social media that when we get likes, when people reshare our content, that we get those little clips, that actually that's a feel-good moment, those little achievements. That's dopamine. It gives us energy, it gives us motivation. That's a brain chemical that we really want to create. So we're going to look at how agile techniques really do give us the opportunity to create on the reward side of this diagram. We can create the pleasure, we can release the pain of change, we can create certainty, we can create reassurance. the collaboration that's so fundamental to the teamwork within Agile creates a wonderful chemical, the oxytocin, the bonding, the trust, the working together. I was on a call yesterday, and I've had some really difficult situations in the last week. And I was on a call yesterday with a couple of people who were listening to some of the difficulties and immediately made some suggestions, and then said they would get those things completed straight after the course, after the call. And I just thought, wow, I really feel connected to these people. I feel reassured by my relationship with them. I feel supported. And even though the situation is incredibly difficult, I actually could feel myself moving much more towards that feeling of reward, opportunity, and value because of their behavior. So the collaboration that we try to build within Agile teams, that's just an example of how we feel we can do more because actually other people have got our back and we feel supported. So effectively, this is what we're looking at. Now, what interests me about this more than anything is the fact that with change life cycles, when we are taking people through a change, a lot of the work that we do is talking about a change as if it were an independent, individual change. That's not the case, is it? We're dealing with multiple changes all at the same time. I dealt with about 5 very significant business changes, including changes of suppliers yesterday. And then I came home to find my builder had changed everything. So we've always got multiple changes on the go. And I like this model because it doesn't matter where I am in any particular change. Almost what you can do with neuroscience is use it as a diagnostic of, yes, but how does somebody feel, irrespective of how much change is happening around them, and how can I move them more towards the right? I've just noticed one change, which is I'm going to plug my laptop in because it's been busy all night and it's got no power. So hang on, guys. I think that's a better way of doing things. I don't want to run out of power. So let's have a look about how I connect this to Agile then. So very simple iterative plan. Iterations or increments at the end. There's a lovely star there for an outcome for each of those. So this is the core to any Agile approach. It doesn't matter what Agile methodology you might be using. At the heart of it is this desire to work in smaller cycles. Let's have a look at why this is brain smart. So the first thing is it's a short amount of time to get things done. So it gives a certain urgency to things. We don't have to look too far ahead before we can see that there will be an achievement. I drew the outcomes of each iteration as a star because it's like a little gold star. I've achieved something. So we don't have to look too far into the future and struggle with something that the brain automatically does, which is delay discounting. The further out something is, the less impactful it is, the less urgent it is, the less important it is. This is something that the pensions industry, the funeral industry suffers from, because at the end of the day, it's hard to put money aside for a potential future that is decades away. It doesn't feel as immediate as, but I want to go on holiday this summer and I want to use my money for that. It's exactly the same in business. We're in February now. I feel I've definitely suffered from the delay discounting my brain did in November and December, where I kept saying to myself, oh, I'll do that in the new year. Oh, I'll do that in the new year. And then by the time I got to the beginning of January, I felt like I had about, 6 weeks of work to cram into about 3.5 weeks. If something is too far away, how can we feel connected to it? So working in small cycles gives you that immediate connection. So that's one of the big advantages. And as I've mentioned, it also gives us the achievement at the end of each iteration, but they are frequent achievements. And we could divide up an iteration into multiple sprints as well. So every couple of weeks, we are getting a frequent achievement. In fact, one of the things I keep looking for, and the School of Positive Psychology will bear this out. We talk about gratitude diaries. A lot of people will say at the end of the day, I sit down and write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Based on this understanding of frequent achievements, it's one of the things that I will often start a difficult meeting with, where I will point out where we've got to since the last meeting, the things that have been achieved. I want people to have that dopamine hit of, yes, we got something done. Because it is that powerful positive brain chemical that opens up that feeling of, yeah, opportunity, excitement, motivation, and resilience. Small cycles of change, dividing something up. Over the year, I can divide something up into 4 or 5 iterations. Within each of those, I can divide that up into short sprints or time boxes of work. Each of those has a very clear deliverable, a very clear achievement. That's where we get those dopamine hits. And the other thing that interests me about the smaller cycles is that not only do I not have to cast further out and it's so far away that I'm not motivated, but also by working in smaller cycles, we reduce the information overload. My brain is trying to process things all of the time. It's trying to cast forward. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And of course, the further out you go, the more of those possibilities there are to process. Effectively, our brain is running almost a scenario planning session all of the time, casting forward what happens, what happens, what happens. And the further out you go in terms of your planning, the more information your brain is trying to process. I definitely got home from the kitchen showroom last night and I just went, I can't take any more in. I couldn't watch television even. I couldn't read a book. I was just sat there. There was so much information that my brain was trying to process, because there were so many things where the builder was saying, well, by the end of the year, you'll have this. And business was saying, over the next 3 years, you'll have this. Too much information. My brain was casting forward too many scenarios. So short cycles give us that opportunity to reduce the information overload. Something else that's so important as far as the brain is concerned is we like certainty. The brain is always casting ahead what's going to happen because it's trying to create its own sense of what's going to happen next. I know what's going to happen next. I feel certain. I feel sure. So when I say this will be ready in 3 weeks, rather than, oh, by the summer we'll have this, my brain is going to find that sense of, oh, yeah, we know exactly what's happening. And of course, what we can use this for is we can use our agile planning as a route map that we can show people, this is the journey we're going to take. These are the things that are going to happen to you along that journey. And then there is that innate sense of certainty. As I describe the journey, we're going to do this, we're going to have these workshops, we're going to present this content at this meeting. As I take you through that expected journey, your brain is going, oh, she's got it worked out. Yeah, I can understand what's going to be happening. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And the brain, again, is going, it's safe to proceed. It's safe to get on board with this initiative because I feel a sense of certainty. The other thing that happens, we've got the short cycles of change. So we aren't having to cast too far forward. We're getting the frequent achievements. We don't have to process too much information, not the whole change, just one chunk of it. It gives us those more immediate achievements. We can understand the roadmap, and that all contributes to something that's really important in the brain. And I'm going to give Tibia a moment to talk about some of these things in just at the end of this slide. But one of the things that's really interesting is the negative impact on the brain if there is a mismatch between what we expect to happen and what actually happens. At any point that there is a mismatch, the brain was expecting one thing and it gets something else, then it creates that real uncertainty. All of my assumptions must be wrong. Therefore, the brain is going, oh, everything I've cast forward and estimated is going to happen next might not happen. So there is a moment of true anxiety, true stress, and it pushes it right back to the threat response. If you've got smaller cycles of change with greater certainty, then there are less assumptions. You can be much clearer about what you're going to get when you're going to get it. Not for the whole change initiative, not over the next year, but certainly by the end of March, this is what should be in place. that enables the brain to go, all right, there's some clarity there. And then it ticks things off as they happen. And it's matching what they expect to happen happens. There's calmness in the brain. What we don't want is for there to be assumptions, misunderstandings. The further out we go, the more we're subject to side effects and consequences, all of which destabilizes how our brain sees the world. So reducing that mismatch is really important. And lastly, a very simple one is that this is a visual tool. And one of the things I love about listening to Tibby on the Neuroscience for Change course is how she explains that, you know, the brain takes a lot less energy to process a visual than it does, for example, you listening to me right now, which is why I put little visuals and little tick signs and little words up here, because I'm trying to give you a picture, because I know your brain will react better to that. Before I go on to some of the things that maybe these small cycles of change don't do as well, Tibby, do you want to comment on any of these elements?
Yes, definitely. And I think what you're saying, what you're talking about the small cycle of change, one important part, which is key, is the beauty of how our brain goes into what we call the peaks, the highs, and the valleys. Right? Our brain, our body is usually connected and wired to function well into big amount of energy, like in a first iteration, we are all working towards something, and then probably the brain releases a lot of energy. But because it's very short period of time, we don't necessarily get the bad impact of a chronic stress. As long as when we finish the first iteration, we go, we reflect, we celebrate, which is what Melanie was saying in the beginning, that the importance of the celebration. So the beauty of small cycles of change is that it kind of goes naturally on the way how our brain is connected. It's also from the mismatch that Melanie was talking, from the error signal. If something goes wrong, because we usually try to match expectations. We usually try to deal with expectations with the stakeholders. But as we all know, things not always match. Actually, most of the time, things don't match, right? So when that happens, if we work with the small iterations, the size of the error from the brain perspective is much smaller. So as Melanie was saying, we will get less overload as a result, and therefore the peak of stress that we go for overloaded is much smaller, and therefore we can much easier go quickly to a reset to what we call the valleys. That's the beauty. And what I would say, once we managing iterations or any type of agile principles, is just make sure you respect iteration 1, rest. Iteration 2, rest, rather than making a huge to-do list of iteration, because this is what I have seen. Surely you have seen that, Melanie, the same.
Well, this is exactly the point I'm going to bring up now, because I think that one of the things that I often see in our Agile roadmaps that concerns me is that what it doesn't do at the moment is that it doesn't allow time for celebrations, and it doesn't allow time for what we call mind wandering and having insights. And I think that one of the things that I am, having been working with Tibby now for a couple of years, one of the things that I've taken away from my understanding of neuroscience is that I need to redraw my Agile approach so that there is the opportunity to reset effectively. Then, whether we call it a retrospective, whatever, I have learned off the back of this that one of the things that we need to do is we have an achievement. So it might be that by the end of March, I'm going to get one of my finance transformations into a better place. We would have had some achievements. The most important thing that I'm going to be sending out as communications, and it happens to be over the Easter period this year, but I'm going to be sending out over a couple of weeks as we end one iteration and before we begin the next, is lots of celebratory messages lots of opportunities to catch up with people, thank them for their hard work, but also point out the difference that they are making, all the positive things that we can notice as a result of what's happening. So staying in that moment of celebration, because if we want to have these positive brain chemicals, if we go to all the trouble of having achievements, what we want is for that dopamine to be enjoyed. The more that we can enjoy that, actually, the more we stay in that energized, seeing change as an opportunity. And actually, what I'm doing with that, I've called it a retrospective here, but that period of time, is that I'm actually building up the resilience and the energy to take us forward into the next iteration, reducing almost the amount of advertising, motivation, inspiring that I have to do, because other people's brains are doing it for them.
And can I add something, sorry, Melanie, to interrupt you, about a celebration? The beauty of the celebration also is that we release a chemistry called endorphins, right? And endorphins are our natural painkillers. And as Melanie saying in the beginning of the presentation, change is painful, right? So we also, on the top of having that energy, the pleasure from the dopamine, we also need to have a chemistry that help us to deal with that pain. And that is the beauty of the celebration as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we can do in this retrospective is that we, and I think this takes careful questioning. I was interviewing somebody yesterday who said, I'm a hardcore facilitator. She's a brilliant transformation director. And she said, my job is to tease out learning, to tease out achievements from other people who often are rushing on going, what's next? What's next? And by pulling together different achievements, we get the celebrations. But she said it's also getting people to connect the dots, giving them lots of new information, summarizing what we've just done before we do something else, that gives them that opportunity to have insights and go, oh yeah, next time I'm going to do this, or have those, oh, we should include that. It's having those opportunities for ideas. Again, very much on the idea that this creates that feeling of, yeah, I'm part of the change. I want to do this change. So small cycles of change work, absolutely, but don't forget to put in periods of time where people can reset. The mind wandering, that thinking over things, connecting the dots, it's almost an opportunity, and Tibby does this brilliantly in the course. We talk about peaks and valleys. And one of the things that we do too often is we're constantly sort of motoring forward and the energy levels are going up and up and we're doing more and more. Actually, the brain responds very well to peaks and then having a valley, coming off that high level. Think of it more as HIIT exercise, the high intensity exercise. You do it for a couple of minutes, you have a rest, you reset before you do the next high intensity exercise. That works very well for the brain. And that's what these retrospectives are doing. The mind wandering, the having ideas is a valley. And then we can go on to the next peak. We're energized to go on to the next peak. Any comments on that, Tibby?
Yes, and I usually get to ask, like, well, what about different type of people, right? Because sometimes I get challenged, say, well, celebration does work well, probably for extroverted people, but there are many ways to celebrate. And this is specifically also with the mind wandering, what Melanie was saying. There are many ways. It's just, it could be just a self-reflection. It could be just providing a positive feedback. What did went well? Let's think about that. That our brain take it as a celebration. So when we're talking about celebration, it's not only to yippee, yeah, we got it. Of course, that help, but it not necessarily work for everyone. It's just having those reflection times, what it went well. It's also, as Melanie say, allowing that time to do nothing. I think we should have in our timeline between iteration and iterations, times just to sit and just do nothing. Look at the ceiling, right? Because that is a mind wandering. It's the strategies like before one iteration to the other one. Let's take a day, just probably half day to talk about different things of what we're talking about. So the brain has time to reset, right? If we do a brainstorming, have time to rest. Let's have time for our brain to go to sleep, come back tomorrow and start to make decisions for the next iteration. That is what we mean of those mind wanderings, those celebrations, those gaps.
I must admit that, again, one of the reflections that I have had as I have been bringing more and more neuroscience into the change initiatives that I do is that I think I was always that kind of person that was, what's next, what's next? And I've never been particularly great at self-care. And I'm now realizing that there are huge brain benefits to self-care. So taking time out in a busy day, I now make sure that I'm going for a walk at lunchtime because of the reset value. The opportunity is I go for a sort of 40-minute walk. Actually, my brain is sort of allowing it to reset from everything that's happened in a busy morning, and it gives me the energy to carry on in the afternoon. There's no afternoon slump because my brain's almost reset what I've been doing. So again, an aside, but I think it's it looks at how we create small cycles of change even within a working day, to be fair. Now, the other thing that I think we do linked to having small cycles of change is you have to be able to prioritize the work as we thin slice through the overall sort of vision of what we're trying to achieve and saying, but this is the first outcome. Let's put this very early on. And then we think these are the next outcomes. It all comes back from this prioritization. Now, whether or not you are a fan of the scaled agile framework, the SAFe methodology, so on the right there, there's a weighted shortest job first, or if you're a member of the Agile Business Consortium and you've studied Agile PM, then you're probably using must, should, could, and won't have. But the key thing I'm interested in as far as prioritization is concerned is that one of the things it can do is by establishing a criteria for what makes something a must have, a should have, a could have, we create common goals and objectives, and that's where we start to bring in that feeling of I'm part of something bigger than myself. So we get that feeling of bonding, that feeling of trust with others, that we understand how other people are working as well. So it's a collaboration tool as much as anything. I mean, we always talk about prioritization as, you know, giving the greatest business value, but we shouldn't forget that it is a collaboration mechanism, because by talking about on what basis are we deciding something's an essential versus it's a nice to have, we create that understanding of what's our objective, what's our common goal. I think something else that it does is it adds a great deal of clarity. And when we talk about focus on quality conversations, what we're really doing here is reducing the processing power that the brain needs, because it's getting the right information at the right time, and it understands on what basis a decision's been taken. So there's less sort of hypothesizing by the brain, oh, maybe we should have done this, maybe we should have done that. So it reduces the information overload, and it enables the brain to go, right, I know what I'm doing. So it increases certainty. So there's an awful lot of benefits around just this simple technique of prioritizing. And it's not, of course, the idea that we pick something is more important than something else. It's the criteria that underlies that decision, and that everybody comes together to agree that criteria. That's really important. Something else that I think happens with prioritization is that our brain likes to look ahead, and particularly if it's got things that it's going, I'm going to have this achievement and then this achievement. So we create that sort of hunting. We hunt out opportunities. We anticipate excitedly, and that creates very positive brain chemicals. So knowing that I'm working on the most valuable thing, and then I'm going to do the next most valuable, then the next most valuable thing, absolutely aligns to how the brain wants to work in terms of feeling positive, feeling I'm doing something useful, but also I'm working with a group of people. We're all on the same page. We have commonality of our approach, our goals, our objectives. Tibi, anything you want to say on that one?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's a good moment to say that I'm not sure if everyone knows here, but our brain consumes so much energy. It consumes about 20% of all our energy. And by these kind of techniques, by making priority of our work, what we're doing is reducing the amount of energy that the brain consumes. We are helping our brain to put the energy in the important. It's like we're saying, yes, must have. Okay, that energy is well spent, right? Nice to have, nice to have. Do I need it now? We can wait. So it's like it gives us the tool to help us to really manage that spend of energy. When Melanie was talking about adding clarity, right? That's the more clarity we add through all these techniques of Agile, the more we are helping the brain to reduce less energy. And if you reduce less energy, what it means, if we get less stress, we get less overload, because all what stress does is provide energy to ourselves. All what stress does is to release adrenaline, and it provides energy, but it's not a sustainable energy through the time. You can use it if I have a deadline tonight. Actually, today I have so much deadline that I'm using the adrenaline to my favor, right? But I'm making sure tomorrow I'm quiet. That's the beauty of making priority of our work.
Thank you. And there's an excellent comment in the chat from Cara about how neuroscience helps us to be people and recognizes the magic of us as human beings and not machines. So thanks for that, Cara. That's really excellent. Prioritizing is one thing, team working, a sense of belonging. So not surprisingly, when we think about things like the team charter and how we establish our team, that very much is, again, we're feeling connected when we're all working towards the same goals. I think something else we should talk about is the positive social interactions, that idea that because we are working respectfully, we value the contributions of other people, because as we set up a team in an agile way of working, we're not worried about hierarchy. We're worried about, what do you know? What are your experiences? What are you bringing to the project? These are the things that I've worked on before. These are my areas of expertise. This is what you can rely on from me. So having those conversations means that there's a feeling of each person gets the opportunity to share what they know, that sense that actually I've done quite a lot. So there's a looking back and feeling that I have value. There's self-respect, there's respect from the team. So that definitely sets an environment of opportunity. It sets an environment of reward rather than threat. So the work that we do, I've just put up a visual of a simple team charter here, but the work that we do when we're establishing the team very much connects to the creation of those positive brain chemicals. And something else that, you know, the benefit of informal meetings and social gatherings. Hierarchy is abandoned when we're in more informal get-togethers, where we're just talking about past experiences, irrespective of job title, irrespective of reporting line. We're coming together as a team of people who collaboratively can make something happen because we've all got different experiences. When instead we're stuck in a sort of hierarchical structure and, oh, I can't talk to him because he's my boss, but I can talk to her because she's my peer. When that happens, as far as the brain is concerned, hierarchy is a threat, because as soon as you see somebody is more senior to you, it's almost as if they have more control over you, and therefore you're losing autonomy. You're losing self-direction, self-choice, because you'll have to cede to the authority of somebody else. As far as the brain's concerned, it very sensibly sees that as a risk, as a threat, because no one else will ever be as obsessed with your care, your well-being, as your own brain. So you can't rely on somebody else to absolutely have all of your interests at heart. So the brain naturally flags the hierarchy, the status, as that's a concern. It could be a threat. Whereas when we get together informally and we're socializing, then what it does is that it gives us the opportunity to feel a sense of individual value. So that is rewarding in itself, but also we get together with other people. We can have free and open conversations, which creates that sense of bonding, that sense of trust. I always reminded of the old Harvard experiment, which talked about it basically is evidence for collaboration, because they ran numerous experiments with other business schools where they got teams of people negotiating with each other. And some of the teams were told to just get on and get the negotiation done, try to get the best price. Other teams were told that they had two objectives. One was to form an alliance with who they are negotiating with, find areas of common interest, and then start the negotiation. And you can probably work out that those who'd found areas of common interest had better negotiations and actually ended up with greater value in terms of the transactions, because they were bonding, because they felt something in common with each other, and therefore they felt a sense of trust. Well, actually, you're like me. I mean, we might have completely different business experiences, but maybe you heard in the background there, I've got 4 rescue dogs at the moment. I'm running a little rescue centre. Anybody who's got dogs, I've also got rescue cats as well. Anybody who's got animals will go, oh, she's one of us. And there'll be an immediate bonding. The bonding can be about anything. We went to the same university, or oh, we did the same course, or I also traveled to Australia in my gap year. It can be anything that we're bonding over. But in those informal meetings, we are far more likely to share hobbies, what we did at the weekend, what we care about, and find some areas that we have in common. Therefore, we build that trust. You're one of us. You're one of me. I can rely on you. So all of the work that we do, using the team charter is just a jumping off point for allowing people to have their say and get to know each other. Any comments on that, Tibi?
Yes, and from the chemistry perspective, what all these things working does, the beauty is that our brain releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is so important because it's like a snowball. The more bonded I am, the more oxytocin I release, then the most trust I get, right? And on the top of that, if I am flow of oxytocin, automatically, physiologically, it reduces our stress. One of the main functions of the oxytocin on the top of bonding and helping with trust is to actually reduce stress. And again, if we are less stressed, we can be much more clear in getting things done, right? And what is very interesting when Melanie was talking about creating these informal meetings and trying to remove the status and not working in silos is that oxytocin works very interesting. If my brain perceives that I am part of the team, I'm part of these informal meetings, I'm part of the group, then I will actually feel much more trust. However, if I am flow of oxytocin and my brain feel like I am not part of the team, but I'm flow up with oxytocin because my silo team, then there is like a war between them. Right? And it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? This is like oxytocin help you to be part of your team. But if this team have a lot of oxytocin and the other silo team have a lot of oxytocin, it's going to be actual aggression between both of them. And this is what the new research say. That's the importance of trying to create these interactions between different types of teams. And as Melanie was saying, removing the silos.
Excellent. Well, I've just seen a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll get through the last couple of bits and then that should leave us a few minutes for questions. Psychological safety, not unrelated to what Tibi was just saying. Effectively, what we want to do is avoid the blame culture and promote the feeling of trust. And I think that one of the things that we can do as part of the team charter, we can do as part of the setup of any team, is establishing what the boundary is for how much authority the team has, and how the team itself takes decisions. When is that point when the team escalates something out to a more senior leader to make sure that they're having their say? Understanding the boundary in which you can operate so that you don't go, you don't overstep things and then be seen as being too controlling perhaps, or you escalate too much out and not being seen to take personal responsibility. Understanding that boundary has been one of the things that I think gives disparate teams, cross-functional teams who've never worked together before, greater clarity. There's something I do a lot with sponsors to say, well, what is it that you want escalated to you? What decisions are you happy for the team to take for themselves? Where is that boundary of power, if you like? Because that is, I think, where the team can then sort of innovate They can be brave, they can pursue their own ideas, not thinking that everything has to be overseen by and authorized by somebody else before they can get on with it. And I think it also enables people, therefore, to, as part of being brave, taking risks, having new ideas, innovating, is that willingness to challenge the status quo, to question things. Well, why do we do it like this? Why did we do it like this last time? How about if we do it like this? And all of that leads to that idea that we are curious, that we are interested in new ideas. We are willing to sort of think wider than just the task we've got to do. We think about how it could best be done. It's all about that questioning, feeling that I am allowed to question. That's, you know, a lot of what we're talking about with psychological safety in an agile environment is we're saying, well, we're piloting, we're prototyping things. We've never done this before. So we can't always look back at past experience and have a clear map of, oh, we'll just do it like we did last time, because this is new and different. We've never created these products or services with this team for these customers under these circumstances. So everything's new and different, really. So what we're looking for is, and what we want to encourage is curiosity and questioning and people having ideas and insights. So I think there's something about how you practically apply the concepts of psychological safety. It's bounded around a lot, but how do we actually make it happen? And I think in all my years of experience, setting out a very clear boundary of, right, as a team, we want you to take full responsibility for these areas, these decisions. You decide whether or not you're going to take decisions within the team based on a voting system, or somebody with the most experience has the casting vote. And these are the areas that you do need to escalate out to more senior leaders to get their say-so. And understanding where that boundary is means that people work very, very effectively within that boundary. So that, I think, is the practicality of psychological safety. Tibi?
Yes, and I would say that also to build a psychological safety is learning for mistakes, right? Having tolerance for mistakes, for errors, right? Is using errors in our favor. I'm not saying we need to promote errors. However, errors are part of human beings. And what we need to have is processes that help us to learn for those errors and not creating that blaming culture. I think that's key for the psychological safety as well.
And we talk quite a lot in the Neuroscience for Change course. We kind of bring to life Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset, because you'll see how important that is in terms of moving us much more towards reward and away from threat. We do some fantastic activities on that that people seem to really enjoy. The last one, as I'm coming towards the end of this webinar, is we started talking about celebrations at the very beginning. Celebrations, planning celebrations. As I said, I've got something happening towards the end of March. I'm already thinking about not only communications that I can send out, so types of celebration, calling out the achievements of the team, and picking a time when I want people to go away, and if they're having a long holiday over the Easter weekend, to really enjoy their time. So thinking very carefully about celebrations. In fact, at the Change Capability Community a few months ago, we did a whole piece on, as part of the start of any change, what's our reward strategy? What's our celebration strategy? So that we do sort of budget for this. We do think about events that we can do. I was on a call a while ago with somebody who held up a little old wooden plaque that was that had been given to her on a change about 15 years ago, where they'd done a little award ceremony, and it was all about the different contributions people had made. But the fact is, she held up this little wooden plaque. It was still in her office, and it still meant something to her all those years ago. And little things like that remind me how important it is that whatever the celebrations, that actually let's make time for that. Let's make sure that we include that. It balances this idea. We're back to almost peaks and valleys, that when we're trying to work through something and trying to get to an achievement, we're sort of always looking ahead. There's a little bit of stress, isn't there? Got to keep going, got to keep going, got to get this done. But then we want that moment where we come off that sort of ever faster treadmill and go, oh, I did it. Oh, that was worthwhile. Oh, I feel good about myself. Oh, I feel quite proud. You know, that feeling of, that creates that culture of positivity. And we know how important positivity is, because positivity enables us to be creative. We are less defensive. We're less quick to anger. We're more willing to work with other people. So it circles back to, if I'm feeling positive, I'm more likely to collaborate with other people. I'm more likely to take risks. I'm more likely to have ideas. I'm more creative. I must admit, after an incredibly stressful day yesterday, I was telling my husband something that I did. I got to about 5 o'clock yesterday, and it was all going horribly wrong. And I could have just wallowed in the horror. And I decided to sort of, I showed a bit of resilience. I went and shut myself in one of those horrible phone booths that we have in shared offices. And for an hour, I just got something written. Tibby, you'll be encouraged to know it was an extra part of the Neuroscience for Change book that we are both struggling to complete at the moment. But when I was talking to my husband, the most important thing I said to him was, I feel proud of myself for the fact that I kept going. And what I did with that conversation with him last night was just take a moment to celebrate the fact that I'd shown some resilience, to celebrate the fact that I hadn't spent the last hour of the day sort of moaning and being angry, but instead I just put it all aside and got on with something. And the point of this story is to show that there are celebrations that we can create that create that culture of positivity and that feeling of being valued and respected, but we can also do it for ourselves. And I think this is also something that's so important to talk about, because it's role modeling the fact that I'm bothering to celebrate a small thing, 1 hour of concentrated work when I could have given up. That's the thing I'm celebrating, that I kept going. And reminding myself that I did something good creates all those feelings, as much as when we do the wider team celebrations. So, and if somebody put up a lovely little heart sign when there was a great question in the chat earlier on, and that little tiny icon as it floated up on the screen I could feel it going, oh, that's nice. You know, even tiny little celebrations like that can have a big impact. I'll give the, I think we've talked quite a lot, Tibby and I, about celebrations. So being wary of the time, we've had a few comments in the chat. Anybody want to ask a specific question? Anything you can see in there, Scott? There's so many comments, I can't see everything.
I can see a question for Nikki saying, I encourage learning from mistakes before, during, and after. However, what are some strategies from a neuroscience perspective to help a person who takes constructive feedback as a failure rather than as a growth opportunity? And I think what I would say is that basically is depending how you do the feedback, right? It's all about how we talk about the feedback. We need to make sure we learn much more from the positive feedback than from the constructive feedback. I'm not saying sometimes we need that developmental, but if we take our time in a separate day to do a positive feedback, we usually try to avoid more those type of people who usually put more attention into what is went wrong and they feel like they have been criticized. So that's what I would say. Keep it separate. Keep the positive feedback, which is really strong and powerful, in a separate day than the one which is the developmental. The day of the developmental, use small positive feedback, like thank you, say thank you. Make it like we usually learn, like the sandwich, but don't put the really powerful positive feedback in the same place. Keep it separate, because our brain is biased to the negative. That's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, Scott, any questions that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Oh, sorry. Go on, Mark. You crack on.
Yeah, some really great stuff there, Mel and Tibby, and I think you struck a chord with the audience looking at some of the comments. Just going back a bit earlier, there was one from Alison. No, it wasn't Alison, sorry. Where was it? So from Bella, so I love that neuroscience is being understood and embedded in how to implement agile ways of working. How do we account for disparate parts of the organization, either not engaging in agile ways of working or are implementing at a different speed?
I'll start this by saying that I think one of the most important things we can do is when we set up collaboration within our own teams, that's one thing. But I think what we can do is much more reaching out to simply say, to just talk people through our own approach. There are so many different agile approaches, even within organizations, that maybe one of the most important things I do is I start to talk about how I'm going to approach things, and even draw a simple visual of my own roadmap and ask them to talk me through theirs. So I think that I don't worry then so much about their pace, or maybe they're using a particular agile methodology that I am not. It's just that we can agree some of the core concepts of agile and how we plan to approach things in an iterative way, how we plan to collaborate, how we plan to do retrospectives and to celebrate achievements. All those things I think we can get on the table. So again, it's just simply bonding with people.
Did you
very
have another
conscious that, yeah, I've got one more question, and then I know that we need to move on.
Yeah, thanks guys. So I was going to read the one out from Bella, but actually there's one from Alison below that saying, can this be applied to organizational changes that are phased or iterated? Do we show the journey and be transparent and risk people worrying about changes that are to come for their jobs, or keep the iterations quiet so people can focus on what is not in close proximity?
I think I'll start that, and I'm sure Tibi's got a view, but I would say that transparency and honesty is always really important. When there are multiple iterations coming up throughout the next year or two, of course, I want to bring the focus to the much more immediate piece. I think that when it comes to, I can't tell you very much about the details of later iterations, because maybe decisions to restructure haven't been taken yet. So what I can talk about is, I will talk about the immediate outcome for the iteration that's right in front of me, and I will draw people's attention to the wider goal that we're trying to achieve, which might be to be a more data-driven organization, to be a more innovative organization, to launch new products and services for our customers. The fact that on the way there may be some restructurings, that people's jobs may change, I'm not going to get into all of those details. I will talk about the immediate outcome and the longer term goal that we're trying to get to. And we can talk about how things will evolve over that point, after that point. Tibi?
Yes, and what I would say is usually trying a sweet spot, right? I think we need to provide the right amount of information at the right time. We need to avoid that overloading. So it is, totally agree with Melanie, it is focusing in the immediate for the detail so you don't overload, but provide transparency. I think we need to be honest where we're going. And if we cannot provide the whole detail of what is coming, because obviously there are confidentiality issues, restructuring, we need to provide to sign the overall idea.
Absolutely. So I hope, I can see from the chat you've all really enjoyed this, we have for an audience that likes to get up early in the morning, we have chunked the Neuroscience for Change course up into 4 half days, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th of March. So in a couple of weeks we're going to be doing it in 4 half days. That enables you to run the rest of your tasks in the afternoon. We would love to see you there. It's going to be a great course. We've got some lovely people on it, and one thing I can guarantee, and the feedback tells me, is that you have amazing insights and people walk away with so many new things to do. It's the power of the takeaways, if you like. When you leave that course, the amount that you can think, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and how much difference it makes. So we really hope to see you on that Neuroscience for Change course very, very soon.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Thanks so much, Tibi. Great, really great stuff. And thanks everyone so much for attending. I'll wrap up quick because I know we're at the end of the hour. So we've got, Mel's put the details of 2 great courses there and just mentioned a few of the details. And we'll include details in the follow-up email. And I know a couple of people have asked in the comments about the recording for this session. So just to reiterate that we will share the on-demand session in the follow-up email, we'll try and get that out hopefully later today, but tomorrow at the latest. So do look out for that.
Or tell your colleagues to join us at the 12:30 UK time one, where we're doing this all again later on today. I can't believe I'm doing it twice in the same day, but there we go.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, share the link. Take care, guys.
Okay.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.